Hello, everyone. Welcome to Art Talk number 171. So, last year, this time, we were focusing on Dia de los Muertos. This year, on the days following Halloween, we're going to be talking about the ancient Egyptian Book of the Dead. The Book of the Dead is an ancient Egyptian funerary text, generally written on papyrus and used from the beginning of the New Kingdom, around 1550 BC to around 50 BC. The original Egyptian name for the text is translated as Book of Coming Forth by Day, or Book of Emerging Forth into the Light. For centuries, Egyptian royalty guarded the sacred rituals that guaranteed divine favor after death. But over time, all Egyptians, both rich and poor, could possess its secrets. So this also happens to be the newest rotating exhibit at the Getty Villa. So if you live in the Los Angeles area or you'll be visiting before January 29th, 2024, definitely be sure to check it out. The Getty's collection of the 19 ancient Egyptian manuscripts is exceptional for its chronological coverage from about 1450 to 100 BC, their fine state of preservation, and for the quality of the imagery and the texts. The Book of the Dead prevails in book print scholarship as one of the most famous aspects of ancient Egyptian culture. This funerary text provides some of the most vivid and enduring images from the ancient world. There are few who have not heard of some version of the Book of the Dead's afterlife mythology. So the Book of the Dead first appeared in the New Kingdom, but the text evolved from a long tradition of magical funerary writing. The oldest of these writings, the pyramid texts, were available exclusively to Egyptian royalty. As religious beliefs on the afterlife changed, copies of the coffin texts, an adapted version of the pyramid texts, were written on coffins and included in the tombs of non-royals, such as wealthy Egyptians and elites. By the New Kingdom, the afterlife was understood as accessible to all who could afford their own Book of the Dead. So the book was not a single text, but a compilation of spells accompanied by these illustrations, and they were designed to guide the deceased through the perils of the underworld and ultimately bring them eternal life. The gods Osiris, associated with resurrection, and Re, associated with the sun, star in the Book of the Dead, and 42 additional gods appear to judge and test the newly departed. Different versions of the text can vary in content and order, and it wasn't until the State period, the 26th dynasty onwards, that there was this defined order. So they organized the chapters into four main sections. Chapters 1 through 16, the deceased enters the tomb and descends to the underworld, and the body regains its powers of movement and speech. Chapters 17 to 63, explanation of the mythic origin of the gods and places. The deceased is made to live again so that they may rise with the morning sun. Chapters 64 to 129, the deceased travels across the sky in the sunbark as one of the blessed dead. In the evening, the deceased travels to the underworld to appear before Osiris. And chapters 130 to 189, having been vindicated, the deceased assumes power in the universe as one of the gods. This section also includes assorted chapters on protective amulets, provision of food, and important places in the afterlife. At present, some 192 spells are known, though no single manuscript contains them all. Again, there were varying versions of this text. And they served a range of purposes. Some intended to give the deceased mythical knowledge in the afterlife, or perhaps to identify them with the gods. Others are incantations to ensure the different elements of the dead person's being were preserved and reunited, and to give the deceased control over the world around them. The texts and images of the Book of the Dead were magical as well as religious. Magic was a legitimate activity as praying to the gods was, even when the magic was aimed at controlling the gods themselves. But overall, there was really little distinction for the ancient Egyptians between magical and religious practice. Mummification served to preserve and transform the physical body into Sa, an idealized form with divine aspects. The Book of the Dead contains spells aimed at preserving the body of the deceased, which may have been recited during this process of mummification. The heart, which was regarded as the aspect of being which included intelligence and memory, was also protected with spells. And in case anything happened to the physical heart, It was common to bury jeweled heart scarabs with the body to protect and provide a replacement. The Ka, or life force, remained in the tomb with the dead body and required sustenance from offerings of food, water, and incense. And in case priests or relatives failed to provide these offerings, spell 105 ensured that the Ka was satisfied. The name of the dead person, which constituted their individuality and was required for their continued existence, was written in many places throughout the book, and spell number 25 ensured that the deceased would remember their own name. If all of these aspects of the person could be variously preserved, remembered, and satiated, then the dead person would live on in the form of an Ak. An Ak was a blessed spirit with magical powers who would dwell among the gods. The nature of the afterlife, which the dead people enjoyed, is difficult to define because the differing traditions within ancient Egyptian religion. But as well as joining the gods, the Book of the Dead also depicts the dead living in the Field of Reeds, an idyllic likeness of the real world. The Field of Reeds is depicted as a lush, plentiful version of the Egyptian way of living. There are fields, crops, oxen, people, and waterways. And here the deceased person is shown encountering the great Ennead, a group of gods, as well as his or her own parents. And the path to the afterlife, as laid out in the Book of the Dead, was a difficult one. So the deceased was required to pass a series of gates, caverns, and mounds guarded by these supernatural creatures. Final judgment and the weighing of the heart might be the most recognizable image from the Book of the Dead. The deceased was led by the god Anubis into the presence of Osiris. There, the dead person swore that he or she had not committed any sin from a list of 42 sins, reciting a text known as the negative confession. Then the dead person's heart was weighed on a pair of scales against the goddess Mot, who embodied truth and justice. And Mot was often represented by an ostrich feather, which was the hieroglyphic sign for her name. If the feather and the heart balanced the scales, the dead person would pass the test. If those whose hearts weighed too much were considered impure, and they were condemned to several horrific fates. The Book of the Dead was produced to order by scribes. They were commissioned by people in preparation for their own funerals or by relatives of someone who was recently deceased. Most owners of the Book of the Dead were evidently part of the social elite. They were initially reserved for the royal family, but later papyri were found in the tombs of scribes, priests, and officials. And by the New Kingdom, access to the Book of the Dead was more widespread. Some copies were lavishly illustrated and costly. Others seemed to be more mass-produced, with blank spaces where the deceased's name could be filled in to personalize their copy. But despite the text's long evolution, its function remained the same for royalty and non-royalty alike: to ease the passage of the deceased through the underworld, offering them protection to face the ordeals and terrors lying in wait there. The existence of the Book of the Dead was known as early as the Middle Ages, well before its contents could be understood. And since it was found in tombs, people assumed that it was a document of religious nature, and this led to kind of a widespread but mistaken belief that the Book of the Dead was equivalent to a Bible or the Quran. But in 1842, Carl Richard Lexius published a translation of a manuscript dated to the Ptolemaic era and coined the name the Book of the Dead. He also introduced the spell numbering system, which is still in use. He identified 165 different spells. The Book of the Dead has been studied for centuries by scholars and gives us clues to what life and death was like in ancient Egypt. Thank you.